Hey, I'll have an amazing episode for you here with Mr. Paul Roos. He's got an amazing background as one of our greatest coaches in Australia, now doing so much with organisations. This is recorded as part of an Enterprise Excellence community meeting, so you'll hear different voices coming in with questions. It was an amazing event, and I know you'll get a lot from this episode. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence podcast, where we share knowledge from global experts and practitioners in how to embed excellence for sustainable results. How to create a culture of continuous improvement and innovation using best practices in operational excellence, customer experience and sales, leadership, strategy, people development, and environmental and social good.
I'm your host, Brad Jeavons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. Enhancing an organisation's ability to continuously improve and innovate at all levels creates amazing results. Up to 10 times productivity improvement, customer and employee experience increases, as well as safer operations and reduced environmental impact. Unfortunately, most programs deployed to enhance a company's ability to improve and adapt fail to deliver. A select few have overcome this trend and truly embedded excellence. This show explores these organisations and steps you can take to improve yours. This show is proudly brought to you by the Enterprise Excellence Community and Group, which is focused on helping organisations embed excellence for sustainable results and a better future. Through the group, you can attend workshops focused on the most important topics to embed excellence. You can also get hold of free resources from the download section of the website, or reach out to one of our members for some advice and help. Visit enterpriseexcellencegroup.com.au to learn more. Mr. Paul Roos on today. It's such an honour. I knew Paul through watching him with the Swans. I also read about what he did with how it influenced the All Blacks. And Paul, it's just an honour to have you on to be able to chat today. You know, both from your sporting background, but also what you're doing now with Performance by Design to just help organisations. So thanks for joining us, mate. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks. I'm excited about the chat. Looking forward to it. And thanks for everyone jumping on. I appreciate people's time's valuable. So thanks for giving us an hour, and hopefully we can make it worthwhile for you.
I think it's going to be great, mate. It's going to be great, even with the pre-discussions you and I have been having.
Right, is it?
Hey, Paul, first question I got, mate, is where did your love of Aussie rules come from? Where did you start in this whole space of Aussie rules?
Yeah, I was probably a typical Melbourne kid. Grew up in a suburb of Melbourne in a place called Donvale, which was sort of back in those days. I don't know anyone is from Melbourne, probably on the call, eastern suburbs, orchards. And I don't know, Warrandyte was a bit like going to the country back when I was a kid. And yeah, really the sort of day between 9 and 3 was going to school just to fill in time so I could then go to play sport. So I played, my mum and dad were tennis players, played for the Donvale Tennis Club. I played basketball. Donvale Primary School put a basketball team in. But football was just normal. Like tennis and basketball, probably a little bit more unusual. Most kids played cricket in summer and football in winter. I played football in winter, which was the popular sport. And because of mum and dad played a lot of tennis, and also just because I went to Donvale Primary and they put a basketball team in, I played a lot of basketball as well. So yeah, everyone loved it, just mucking around with your mates and having a good time. So that's probably the way I started. Was typical of any young kid at that age at that particular time.
Yeah, it's a common theme. My boy Charlie will love hearing that you love basketball, Paul, so he'll be all over that one. Hey, well, you went into this career and you're awarded as a player so many times. Like, what was it, 5, 7 all-star like player? Like, what was your secret, mate, going into the playing career that you found really started to notch performance there? And then I'm keen for you to segue then into that coaching with the Swans on that. Like, keen to unpack that, your secrets of success as a player, and then transform that into coaching.
Yeah, look, I was really fortunate to go to Fitzroy. So back in those days, you were zoned to a club. So I lived in Donvale, as I said, and there was only 12 teams. It was a Victorian football league back then, so they're all Victorian teams. I was zoned to Fitzroy. I actually was a Carlton supporter, but I was zoned to Fitzroy. So I just went down to Fitzroy as they had an under 19 comp, so I was about 15 or 16. And that was really the start of it. There's no question. I didn't realize at the time how lucky I was. But role model leaders are just so important. And it really, stage one of shaping my whole life was going to Fitzroy and meeting those role model leaders. You and I spoke about before we got on today. Gary Wilson was my first captain. And I'm talking, I went to Fitzroy back in 1980. Gary and I met in 1981. I just spent, the previous grand final that Brisbane Lions won, Gary and I were watching in Hawaii, so we're still friends years later. And what I realized, there's probably a couple of things that I was fortunate. Every kid was talented. So talent wasn't enough. There was a point where you get to a footy club, and I was talented, but it wasn't enough. And you looked around it, and what is normal in an organisation, and we'll get onto culture probably more later, but you just try to fit in. So all I did as a young kid was try to fit in. And what I realised was great people, great work ethic, really honest, really respectful, really looked after each other, but super competitive. And that was sort of the start of my journey. And then, like everyone, you have to make the decision. Do I want to be part of this organisation? This is a high performing organisation. Do I, Paul Roos, want to be part of it? Because if I do, I can't be lazy anymore. I've got to work at the same level that everyone else does. So, and then I think because of if your work ethic matches your talent, it's a pretty good recipe for success. Now I wasn't, we always joke about the players from my era. What number would you got drafted these days? Like I wasn't a top, I made the Teal Cup Victorian team. I made the All Australian team, but it wasn't like I was the best player in the country. But once I established, no, everyone is good. I needed to work as hard as Gary Wilson, Laurie Serafini, Bernie Quinlan, Mickey Conlon. But I just had great role models. And I'm really, really fortunate to this day to be able to look back and say that if I hadn't have gone to Fitzroy, I don't think I would have won the premiership in 2005. That's how significant that moment was. There's the other two things, Brad, were really important. So at the end of my playing career, I was really fortunate. I spanned this semi-professional environment. So when I started at Fitzroy, we would train in the morning at Kerford Road and train in the afternoon. My first job was at the AMP. I worked all the way up until I went to Sydney in 1995. But I was fortunate to play in an era of semi-professional to professional. So leadership changed dramatically, as in the coaches. And I sat down at my desk in October 1998, and I've got the document here actually. And I wrote the things I liked about my leaders and the things I didn't like about my leaders. And it held, I didn't coach till 4 years later, 5 years later. This was October 1998, and I didn't coach till midway through 2002. But that document was pivotal in holding me accountable to the leader that I wish I had. And I'll ask everyone on the line, would you want to lead yourself? All right. Would you want to manage yourself? Would you want to lead yourself? And it was written through the eyes of a player, what I liked about my leaders and what I didn't like about my leaders. And I had that as an audit for 8.5 years for Sydney Swans and the 3 years I coached the Melbourne Football Club. And if you haven't done it, it's worth doing it. Right? Because if you're really honest, I would say you're doing things now that you said you hated as a person being led by someone else. But habits are really hard to break. Right? And it held me accountable. The third thing, Brad, was I felt you could systemize culture. Okay, like when we talk about now performance by design, don't leave your culture to chance. And most companies do, or most organizations. But I felt there was an opportunity. How can we systemize culture? All right, so if we're looking for role model leaders, and if we're looking to systemize a behavioral platform, how do we do that? And that started in October, November 2002 down at Coffs Harbour. And we were the first team to do it. And we systemized it, and we got the players and coaches together to come up with a set of behaviours, clear behaviours. Then we got the players to vote for the leadership group. So we weren't going to say, well, we'll just pick a good player and hope they've got good behaviours. We systemized it by saying, here's our Bloods culture. Rightio, guys, vote for your leadership group, and out of the leadership group, we will pick the captain. And Stewie Maxfield probably changed the way captaincy was seen in AFL football. And I remember the board thinking, hang on, he's not in our best 10 players. Yeah, but he's our best leader. All right, so that was part of systemizing it. So they were probably the main things that allowed me to become successful as a coach and win the premiership in 2005.
Well, I love how curious you've been through your journey on that. Because like I meet a lot of people who come out of great organizations. I can't say sport. I'm not connected enough.
Yep.
But I see a lot of people that come out of great organizations and then they go to try help other organizations, but they can't really because they don't know what created the great organization. But you, when you're back at Fitzroy, you really thought deeply. You know that the ideal behaviors of those around you were helping create great outcomes, and you chose to buy in. And then you actually documented it, the ideal behaviors, before you even became a coach. And then you've actively led ideal behaviors and systemizing it. It's unique, mate. Like, where's that curiosity come from that you've done that? Because it's not common.
Yeah, it's funny because my business partner always jokes. We do insights discoveries, our profiling, and he says, "How the hell did you become a coach?" Because I'm a green blue, and anyone that's done the disc is a slightly different color. I think one of them is a different color, but insights discovery, anyone that's done it, green is the dove and blue is the analytical owl. Most coaches back in my day were high reds, and my business partner's a high red, and he said to me. It was literally during a workshop. He said, "How the F did you ever become a coach?" And I think the answer to your question is because of my profile. I was always inquisitive, and the other thing I did when I retired in 1998, I went to America. My wife's from California. We lived in America for 10 months. And I was really fortunate with contacts. I went to the San Francisco 49ers, the LA Lakers, the Chicago Bears, Chicago Bulls, the Denver Broncos, the LA Chargers. Hung out with Pete Sampras, who was being coached by a mate of mine. So learning, not that I wasn't a great student, I wasn't dumb, but I just loved sport more than school. But I was just, yeah, I think as I said, I think it was my profile, my personality profile that allowed me to sit down at my desk in October 1998, plan a trip into October 1999. I think we learn organically as well, but I think, most people go through life and probably not register what that meant, what Fitzroy meant. It was just easy to go play Fitzroy and then play 13 seasons, go to Sydney, but I really recognize the significance of the people. So I think it's my personality profiling. So for those of you who aren't that inquisitive, what we talk about at Performance by Design is you have to get in and out of your colors. All right. So if you aren't by nature very analytical or very inquisitive, spend some time doing it. We talk about, yeah, there's some blue activities, there's some red activities, like making this game day is high red. Like you don't have time to take anyone for a coffee at quarter time and say, "Oh, mate, you made that mistake." And you know, so I found game day really exhausting, and I never knew why until I'd done the profiling and got it explained to me. So spending 4 hours in red as a green blue is really difficult. But to
Yeah.
be a good leader, you have to do it. Like I don't care what color you are, and I say this in workshops. I don't care what color you are, but the best leaders get in and out of the colors. All right, they do it constantly. So I think Brad, that was the reason. I just was my natural profile was to sort of try to understand things, try to understand people, and then that allowed me to systemize the culture at the Sydney Swans.
So good, Paul. Hey, Paul, do you know Wayne Bennett? Have you come across Wayne in your time?
I'll tell you a funny story. So when I took over in 2002, 10 weeks ago, Rodney Eade resigned as coach. And, we weren't going that well. And Nathan Gibbs was my doctor. And Nathan was the doctor for the state of origin as well. And he knew Wayne Bennett really, really well. I said, Gibbsy, what's the chance of getting Wayne to come and speak to us? And he looked at the roster. He said, "Oh, he's actually in town next week." I said, "Mate, we'd love him to come in and chat." And he got back to me and said, "Mate, he's keen. He's happy to come in." And I said, "Oh, mate, that'd be awesome." And I'd never met him before, but everyone knows Wayne Bennett. And I don't know whether people on this call know Paul Kelly, but Paul Kelly was a really tough. He was the captain of the Sydney Swans Footy Club, just a tough, hard, Wagga country boy that you know played his footy really tough and really, really good guy. loved the beer, loved the chat, loved it, So anyway, Cal was sitting in the front row, and it was like, so Wayne came in, and it was like Clint Eastwood talking to the group, and he's just got this aura about him, and he got to the end of the talk, and he said that because we weren't winning at the time, he said, "Well, Cal, what do you reckon? You have to change some stuff." And Cal just froze. It was like dead set. It was like Clint Eastwood pulled out a six shooter in a bar in one of the movies but just this aura of the man and what he spoke about, and it was it was really significant because I think what he questioned, he said it's easy, whether it's a business or sport, to just keep doing the things you're doing. We talk about it now, performance by design. Is what you're doing taking you to where you want to get to? If it's not, stop doing it. But too many people, and we were probably just rolling on as a footy club. Yeah, we were okay. We played in the grand final in '96. We got some good people there. And I think that sort of sparked the organisation into saying, yeah, we do need to change.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool.
Well, the reason I asked, mate, he's definitely green blue. Wayne is
Hmm.
green blue. Like it's
Yep,
it's
yep,
uh it's there's it's like a common theme. Now, mate,
yeah.
I know that you got to also, according to James Kerr anyway, and I will take your gospel on it. I understand that the All Blacks in their time of need came over to the Bloods. Do you mind sharing what played out there and maybe, what did they see at the Bloods that they took back? And you could probably give us both angles if you don't mind, mate.
Yeah, no, it was really, I mean, it's fantastic because everyone's heard of the All Blacks and they came and saw us. There was about five or six of them, I think, assistant coaches, fitness guys. And we just had an amazing sort of round table discussion. And I think based on James' book, um, one of the big things they took from us was the so-called no dickheads policy that we had. And, their challenge a lot was around the provinces, how they don't really control, whereas we were able to control. So we spoke a lot about that, how they had another system below them. That was a significant thing, and we chatted about that. But I think the big thing that they took from us was how much time we spent on people and evaluating people and understanding them, and that's not to say, and people ask me a lot about this. For those of you who don't follow the Swans, I think it was our recruiting guy once said it wasn't like we had it written in the club. Like people sort of think, oh, the Sydney Swans had this no dickheads policy. It wasn't, I don't know if there's any HR people on the call, but it wasn't a document, no dickheads policy with point one, two, three, four, five. I think our recruiting guy must have got interviewed once and said we have a no dickheads policy. But the way I'd explain it more is, we talk about weighted numbers. We had a system and you could act your way into the system or you could act your way out of the system. And I think that was the thing that
Ah,
the All Blacks like resonated with. We need to put a system in place of that and use the word dickhead. I don't know. But let's say a dickhead came into Sydney. We would say, look, this is how we act and this is what we do. You can choose to act your way in, but if his behavior wasn't going to affect the rest of the team. Does that make sense to everyone?
yeah.
And then what would happen is they would weed themselves out. Now, a young organization, a young team, I would recommend not bringing that person in. Again, nod your head if you understand what I'm saying. Yeah, if you have a really good culture and you've got a talented person that's perhaps been at not a good culture, then I would bring them in. Now, because it's not going to affect 90% of the people within your business. No, if you've got a young team, an impressionable team like the Gold Coast Suns or the Giants when they initially, then don't bring those people in, right? Because if they don't change, and I talk about weighted numbers, a footy club's about 44 players. At Sydney when we won the premiership, we had 40 to 4. The weighted numbers were well in the affirmative of people doing the right thing. We got a young team, it might be 22, 22. So you can't, the negative can't become 24 or 26 or 28. So that's the thing. So for us, it was more about, we'll do our research. If that's a questionable character, we would ask the players, guys, what do you think? And if they said no, we'd go no. So no, look, I've heard he's not as bad as what, and we think he's just looking for some direction and et cetera, et cetera. So and I think that was the really big discussion we had with the All Blacks, as well as talking about the lower the tier teams and how they didn't really have much control over them. But one of the great things about being involved in sport and a footy club, is you get to meet some really cool people from all walks of life, but business. One of my best stories is when I took over at Sydney, the CEO of Ford Australia, a guy called Jeff Pilates, who's unfortunately passed away about 10 years ago now.
Ah,
CEO of Ford Australia was taking notes in my box as I was a coach, and I remember thinking, geez, sport is amazing. Like he would just like I would yell something out, or we've got to do this, and Jeff would give me the notes at quarter time and half time and three-quarter time. And and I used to say to the players all the time, use the connections, use your network. And Jeff and I became great. But he's the CEO of Ford coming to Sydney on the weekend, taking notes for me and handing them to me, quarter time, half time, three-quarter time. So, yeah, use your network, be inquisitive, make sure you're learning. And some of the stuff you'll disregard, like some of the stuff today I say, you'll say, no, look, that doesn't. But the more information you have and the more people you learn from, the greater your library becomes.
yeah. I love it, Paul. You're saying really it's about being clear on your culture and your ideal behaviors. And then, especially with a young team, being diligent to that because they're so influenced. But then in an older team, you just got to keep the ratio right. And I can really hear involve the crew in discussing that. Like how you mentioned, you would go talk to the players. But with the All Blacks too, one thing that I saw was this bit on legacy, like the purpose of you know, taking the jersey off in better condition than when you first put it on as a player. Was that something at the Bloods? It's like pride in the jersey and like we want to leave the jersey in a better place, or was there a different version of that? That was something else I read that they accredited to the Bloods.
Yeah, 100%. Richard Collis talks about it a lot. He was the chairman. I was there, coming into the place and leaving it a better place. And I think that's probably one thing with culture we forget. It's transferable. Like, I don't know, clearly with all the people on the call today, I have no idea what you all do. But if we think of culture of just what happens at the Sydney Swans or just what happens at Ford or just what happens at Bunnings or whatever, we're missing the point. Culture is about if you're a good person, it's unlikely you're going to be a bad person at home or a bad person at work. I think it's Richard Branson that talks about this, and it really resonated with me. I'm pretty sure I don't. It doesn't really matter. But what he talked about, most companies say the most important people are our customers. What Richard says is no, that's not true. The most important people are the people in your business. Because if you treat them well, you'll treat your customers well. If you treat your customers well, it doesn't mean you're going to treat people internally well. And that really hit me as well. I was thinking, and that's probably the system we set up was designed for the players to become better human beings. And as such, people, I want to represent this football club, and this football club means a lot to me. And I will come in here and I will be really serious in what I can do for this club and what the club can do for me. But I fully believe it was interesting, and some things you learn in hindsight and you look back on. But I was in our 20th year celebration for the premiership in 2005, which we had last year. The probably the biggest compliments I got came from players' wives and girlfriends. Now, girlfriends at the time and wives, and I would have had half a dozen come up to me and say, Paul, thanks very much for creating the environment you did. And it was really quite, humbling to have them come and make it their way. And I think that to me is what the All Blacks stand for. And I'm in America now, and I think there's one American. Is there American, did you say on the call?
Yeah, Shelley's on. Yeah.
Sally might resonate with this. American sport has completely lost its identity. American sport now is about the individual. the individual money, and culture is very, very rare. And it's sad because if you look at The Last Dance, if you look at Greg Popovich with the San Antonio Spurs, but if you want to look at, if you put individuals ahead of the team, look at American sport now. College, I don't know whether, I don't want to get too deep into it, but college sport now pays players. It's called the NIL. They pay players. So it's really stark to see where American sport has gone and Australian sport is still hanging on to this notion of teamwork. And if I'm better collectively, we're better, I'm better individual if I work for the team, no egos and all those sorts of things. And I think that's when I look at the All Blacks and the discussion we had and what we tried to do at Sydney, um, that really sort of sums it up.
Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant. And you'd hate to lose that, like there's just so much in that human factor of that team outcome too. So Paul, you went from this amazing career, one of the best coaches we've had, and then you've gone to business where you've gone, right, I'm going to set up performance by design. What led you to that, mate, that you want to help industry and business?
Yeah, it's probably a couple of things. But after I won a premiership, now Shelley, just so you know, I live in Hawaii too. So my wife's from California. So I actually watch a lot of sport and I'm been fascinated by it. So before you're sitting there going, what's this Aussie talking about American sport? I'm actually, but um, I'm I'm fascinated. Um, so what, Brad? Sorry, what was the question again?
Yeah, what led you to go, right, I've had this career, learnt so much in sport,
Oh
and I
yeah.
now want to transfer and help organizations and industry through performance by design.
So because I started in the semi-professional environment and went to fully professional, so I saw this. If you look at sport, it was probably seen, yeah, back in the 80s as yeah, just a hard, tough, brutal industry, survival, a bit like Darwin's survival of the fittest, like you get through. I show some of my boys some of the vision and they go, geez, Dad, how did you play in that era? And rugby league was really tough as well. But then when we became fully professional, it just became like business. Our product is just happens to be football. Yeah, but we have people like everyone else does. Won the premiership in 2005, and I'd start to do a lot of corporate keynotes when I could, and people would often come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, look, can you come in and help us with our culture?" I'm like, "Hang on, I'm coaching the Sydney Swans, and then I was coaching the Melbourne Footy Club." So when I retired from Melbourne, I had a couple of people contact me and wanted to start a business, but more importantly, I realised there's so many synergies. It's really similar. So starting the business was relatively easy and systemizing the corporate space. I mean, there's quite a few things which we could probably touch on, not different, but like, and I say this, and this is not to denigrate any of the corporate space, but the worst footy teams are better than the best corporate business I've worked with. And from a number of reasons, primarily because they spend a lot more time on it. And I think the corporate world still leaves it to chance. Yeah, let's get a good group of people. And I'm sure people on this call, how many people have worked at a business that says you get out of the lift and it says passion, honesty, trust. No one gives a shit about their job. Everyone hates each other and everyone lies to each other. But because we've got these shiny signs up, yeah, we've got this great culture. We see it now all the time. So I'm just really passionate now about leadership and because I've seen, as you said, Brad, when you've seen what it looks like, you're really clear on it. And I wasn't clear when I started Sydney. Like it was a bit of a leap of faith. Like I'm thinking, I remember presenting to the board and I said something like, I'll deliver a premiership to the Sydney Swans in the next 3 years. And it's sort of like, well, I hope that gets me the job. I don't know if it's going to really happen, um, but I had a system that I wanted to implement and I was also willing to walk away. If that system didn't work at Sydney, I would have walked away. Having seen it and then having duplicated it at the Melbourne Footy Club, I know it works, but it's really hard. It's a great stat. I think it's something like 90% of CEOs believe culture is more important than the technical side. But 75% of those same CEOs, guess where they divert to?
Yeah.
Technical. Because that's what they get taught. You don't go
Yeah.
to Donvale High School and learn about leadership. You don't go to Monash Uni or Melbourne Uni or Sydney Uni to learn about leadership. You don't walk into AMP and learn about leadership. No one's teaching leadership. So now when I look back, I can tell you exactly, people say to me, what's happened to Carlton or what's happened there, what's happened there, even from a corporate point. I can spend a week in your business and tell you exactly what's wrong with it. From not from
Yeah.
a technical point of view, but from a cultural point of view.
Yeah.
100%. Now, football, I'd be able to tell you both. I'd be able to tell you from a technical and a culture. But yeah, I'm really clear in what a high performing team looks like.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And well, I guess we see it too. You go into a company and if they're obsessing about the net profit and just the financials and just moving structures and people around, it's out of control. But it's simple but not easy, isn't it? Like you've been mentioning, Paul. I know with performance by design, you talk about dynamics and mechanics. And do you mind just explaining that and linking back to that behavior piece? Like how do companies go about it?
Yeah.
Oh, how should they go about it?
Yeah, look, it's really simple, but again, sometimes simple becomes, oh, that sounds too simple. But regardless, I'll give you, simply, I'll start with Sydney. So we went down to Coffs Harbour and we almost did a cultural audit. And this is pretty much how we start with everyone. But how do you think we're perceived by the other teams in the competition? Oh, we're weak, we fold under pressure. So you've got to be honest with where you're at. The corporate company, how would you give us 3 words to describe your team? And each person writes it down. How would others in the organisation describe you? Okay. How do you want to be described? And that's the honesty piece, And then what behaviours you're walking past? What behaviours are we accepting at the moment that we know are not getting us to where we want to get to? All right. And what behaviours do we want to hold each other accountable to? So you've got to be pretty honest in where you're at and where you want to get to. People are smart. I say this all the time. We all know, if we were a company here, Emily's on the call. So 44, we're having a town hall. We've got Paul Roos giving a keynote, and I'm talking about our behaviours, and I say to you, well, what behaviours are walking past? Paul Dean knows exactly what they are, don't you,
Yeah,
Paul? Yeah. Trevor knows what they are. Mark knows what they are. John knows what they are. We all know what they are. But guess what? We don't want to hold it. Firstly, we don't want to hold ourselves accountable. All right. And secondly, what's really become really hard in the corporate world is feedback. Most recently, Nathan Jones, who was my captain at Melbourne, does some work with us, did a keynote for us. I wasn't there, but Jared, my business partner, just impromptu asked him a question. Hey, Jonesy, what's the biggest difference between the corporate world and the sport? He said, without batting an eyelid, he said feedback. He said, I don't get any feedback in the corporate world. He said, in sport, what we've done with feedback in the corporate world is 3 to 6 month review. All right. And guess what happens? Alarm clock goes off. I'm the one giving the review. Tammy says, what's your day look like today? I go, oh, shit day. Shit day today. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, I've got 5, you know, feedback sessions to give. Guess what? The 5 people, their alarm clock goes off. Their wives or partners or husbands or whatever said to them, what are you doing today? Oh, I'm getting feedback today. We've taken feedback as largely negative. I mean, you guys probably said the Harvard Business Studies now 4 to 7 to 1 positive to negative. So when I talk about feedback, footy clubs are largely positive. Well done, fantastic. That was awesome. Here's some vision. Let's keep doing. But if we keep doing that, we're not going to get to where we get to. All right. So that's probably one thing that we talk a lot about. So who are we? What do we need to stand for? And then how do we get to? But there's a part in between too, Brad. We need to build strong relationships to have honest conversations.
yeah,
So who are we? What do we stand for? Be really clear on that. Build strong relationships. So think about the people you have the most honest conversations with. Then we get to feedback. I remember when I first started the company, I had this guy ring me and he said, Roosie, tell us about performance by design. This was about 9 years ago. And I went through the structure. He said, yeah, we had someone come in and we did a feedback session. And I said, oh, okay. I said, what was the feedback based on? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you had a feedback session. What did the facilitator, what was the criteria? He goes, oh, there wasn't any criteria. And I sort of chuckled under my breath. I said, oh, how'd the session go? He goes, no, it didn't go very well. And I sort of said, well, what do you think was going to happen? So we need to be clear on what the feedback's going to be, but we need to have really strong relationships. When I played at Sydney with most of the players, that was a huge advantage. So they knew me. When I went to the Melbourne Footy Club, the first 3 months I said to the coaches who I brought from Sydney, build strong relationships. I don't want to see you in your office. Walk with them, train with them, go to the gym with them, go and have a coffee with them, because we're in this with them. For those of you who don't know Melbourne Footy Club, when I started there, they won 2 games and lost 20 the year before. All right.
Wow.
6 years of losing. All right. So we were going to have some honest conversations with them, not to them, with them. So I said, boys, we need to build really strong relationships so they understand that the feedback comes from a position of care. And that's the other thing. Only give feedback because you care about people. You care about them and you want them to get better, not because you had a fight with your wife, Tammy, this morning, and I feel shit, so I'm going to make everyone else feel shit. All right. So we give feedback because we care and we want the organisation to get better. And the only thing I can control in the feedback loop is how I give it. Right way, right time, right place. Right. Try not to give feedback when you're emotional, which is hard, but try not to do that. So that's sort of the system, Brad. Yeah, and then we obviously there's a lot more details around it, but that's the basis of the system. Yeah, clear on who you are, build really strong relationships. We do the profiling, understanding yourself, understanding others, but we do it as a team. Most companies do profiling. Brad, here's your profile, here's your strength, here's your weaknesses, here's your computer. Good luck. We'll then dissect the profiling because leadership is about influence. All right. So if I have a conversation with Paul, I'm a a blue green. Paul, I don't know, Paul Dean from a bar of soap, but I don't know, where are you, mate? Is that a screenshot behind you? I'm just happened to be in the top left. Now he's a high red. I bore him to death with details. I pour my heart out. And I go home, Tammy, how's your day? Oh, I had this great conversation with Paul. Yeah, it was fantastic. Guess what? Paul goes home to his partner or whoever and goes, geez, Roosy, I've no idea what he's talking about today. All right. I think it's a great conversation. He thinks it's terrible. I'm the leader, my fault, not his fault, because I haven't resonated with him. Leadership is about influence. Paul, don't do this. Get your budget made. You need to make more phone calls. You understand? Yeah, fantastic. Paul goes home. Great conversation with Rusey today. He's really clear on how he spoke to me. I understand what I need to do. All right. So there's a system that we put in place, and then we partner up and we do reviews constantly about that system.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, Paul. Well, final question before I open it up to the group and we just let any questions come from the team is you've got those three key elements, mate, which is the being clear on who we are, but that can become window dressing really fast, like you said, and then work on relationships and then build capability on feedback, both positive and constructive. What do you see typically in companies as you turn around is the biggest derailer that just stops company them being able to nail those three? Yeah, actually,
Yeah, lack of commitment to it, mate. Like to give you an idea, and I'm not suggesting corporates should do this, but we would have our leadership person come once a week. You know, worst case scenario, once every 2 weeks, and we would put time aside to it, and we would review constantly our culture. I think that's the biggest thing is just no commitment towards it. Yeah, the 1 day workshop, everyone understands, great, that's fantastic. And then we don't do anything for 12 months or 2 years or 3 years. Because and I also think this, and this is not a sales pitch, but people say, would you coach again? I wouldn't, but I would never coach a team without an external facilitator, consultant, because it can't be my system. It has to be our system. All right. So I, as the coach or the CEO, has to be held as accountable as the people that I'm leading. And so as soon as you have an internal, now you can have internal, development sessions and all those sorts of things, but getting someone in from externally holds the leader accountable, all right, which is really, really important. So they're probably the main things. We sort of do it internally. We do it half-heartedly. We don't do it at all. So the commitment, Brad, is probably the biggest difference that I see.
Yeah, they go to the workshops, get fired up, go back to work, and end up doing the same old thing, and it just becomes that wallpaper.
Yeah.
Those list of behaviours that we define but really aren't doing anything with. It's great insights, Paul. Thanks so much for the information on myself, mate. I want to hand over to the group now. Group, what questions have you got? John Broadbent, I see you've got your hand up, mate.
Got in early. G'day, Paul. Good to have you on the call.
Thanks, John.
You mentioned the sport and business, and just a small anecdote. Back in the early 80s, I was at PepsiCo at Huntingwood here in Sydney, and when I walked in, I saw all these charts on the wall, and they were very different to anything I had seen. And when I met my host, he was a big Texan with a 10-gallon hat.
Oh, yeah.
Comes out into the room, and he explains that they run a process developed called the Game of Work by an American NFL guy.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
whole idea was that if we don't know how to have crucial conversations with our team, then we don't know where the boundaries are. And his comment was that the whole business model that they developed in the Game of Work was understanding that businesses need boundaries because the winners are the risk takers. And so the translation from sport to business made so much sense to me in those days, because you've got to do immediate feedback during the game, you've got to do immediate feedback after the game. And that's why the whole annual performance thing, when you raise that, for me, is such a prickly thing, because waiting 6 to 12 months to sit in a room. And I realized in my own career with performance reviews that the moment I walk into that room, there's a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
the person doing my review wants to minimize my pay rise because he's got a bucket, or he or she has a bucket of money for the staff salaries, and I'm in there trying to talk myself up, and he doesn't remember what I did 6 months, 8 months, 12 months ago anyway, so I have to, advocate for myself. I thought, what a waste of fucking time. That actually is. Nobody likes it. It doesn't do anything, and HR get to tick a box.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, one of the things I'm 62 now, and I said this to the players at the reunion last year. Like, I'm really fortunate to be in sport, and I probably took that for granted, John, a bit. That what I was able to learn, most people don't. And I worked as well. Like, I worked, AMP. I worked in sales. I learned far more in sport because of the demands of sport. Like we see now, the pressure, you have to make a change. You can't just keep doing the same things over and over and over again. And as you've articulated really well, some of the differences, you know, we I can't wait to give feedback on game day. Like, now sometimes it's pretty brutal. That's when the follow-up takes place, but the players understand that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we can't wait. We got another game next week. The other thing, and Brad, you asked me a question before. The other thing that sport does, we don't kick the can down the road. And I see that in business all the time. I can't ring up the AFL and say, oh, look, our two best players are injured. Flu's gone through. Look, I know we've got to play at 1:10 on Saturday, but can we move that game next week? The corporate world is fantastic at going, oh, hey, Brad, can you move that meeting? I'm just not ready for that presentation. So we just move everything. And feedback, John, is one of those things. Let's just keep moving feedback down the road to the point where it becomes irrelevant, because
Mm.
the thing that you're getting feedback on happened 6 months ago. You know, so what I say about feedback, and before we hand over to someone else, who are you holding back by not giving feedback?
There's also a fabulous book called Thanks for the Feedback, which I was read a few years ago, which I really enjoyed because it's quite funny. And the authors, researchers out of Harvard, I think, talk about um, we're getting feedback all the time. A speeding ticket's feedback, it's unsolicited, but we get it anyway. And they actually break the feedback down into coaching, mentoring, and different roles. So someone can go and say, hey, what do you think about this? Thinking that they're going to get a pat on the back, because what they're looking for is acknowledgement. But what they get is a kick up the arse instead. So they come away. So it's important that we understand what is the feedback that we're asking for, and that we frame the feedback that we're giving to someone, what it's actually about, to give it bloody context, which also doesn't happen a lot of the time.
100%, yeah, 100%. What are we giving the feedback for and why? Because
Yeah.
yeah, that's the other thing. Like we say this all the time. If we get to the end of a workshop and someone's sitting out the front and doing a fantastic job, we're like, guys, don't make up the feedback. You don't have to give feedback. There's not a gold star at the end of the week for the person that gives the most feedback. So if they're doing a really good job, just say, John, fantastic, mate. My feedback is keep doing what you're doing. You're a great teammate. You
Yep.
do what you say you're going to do. You work really hard. So we don't have to give feedback just because we want to give feedback. You know, like I said, not a gold star for the feedback person.
And it's
Nice.
unthinkable that a team shows up on the weekend not as a team, and yet in corporate, the whole concept of team I see is often missing completely because it's all about management, micromanagement, and power grabs.
Yeah, 100%.
Just,
Well, again, we might better hand to someone else, but I'll
yeah,
give you a quick example of this. And I don't know. There's this thing called work from home now. Now I'm not wedded either way because we've always had people that work from home. I was a sales rep and I worked, but a sales rep for Active Leisure, we had our meeting at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, regardless. So what I say is probably follow on from what you're saying, John, is I don't really care. But if you follow the sporting team and their forwards were training in Randwick, their backs were training out at Castle Hill, and the midfielders were training at Coogee. Are they high point? Are they high? What would you say? You go, hang on, what the hell? How can they turn up on the weekend and play as a team? So those simple, in my mind, these simple things, we've overcomplicated them for certain reasons.
mm, yep.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, John. Paul Dean, hand over to you.
Yeah, Paul, I love everything you say. I've actually seen you a few times. Interesting enough, been a Swan supporter for a long, long time. My wife's family, South Melbourne, and then translated that to Sydney. And the other thing is, just very quickly before I ask my question, is my GP was Edelston, so
Oh,
the
right.
days of the carpeted stuff in the waiting room was very,
Yeah.
very interested. Um, so yeah, so the question I've got for you, Paul, is you know, with game day with footy, it's a big event, right?
Yep.
So you've got to put your game face on, you've got to put your best playing forward. How do you use that kind of game day with business? What's your advice to business? Because, John mentioned it before that, it's pretty much, well, it should be game day every day, but people don't treat it like that. So I mean, maybe it's not a vague, maybe it's too vague, but how do you talk to businesses about playing their best when it's all the time?
Yeah, it's different for different companies. I'll answer it probably a bit differently. So make just as long as you have a system in place, right? So the system's going to be slightly different. Yeah, for instance, a real estate agent probably does have it at game day, don't they? Like if you've got auctions on the weekend, then you have a game day. So, but don't get confused by that's what we do. Because sometimes people say to us, yeah, but you have an outcome and you have everyone wants to win a premiership. That's absolute garbage. That's garbage. Not every player that goes to a footy club wins a premiership, right? So, but what I'm saying is, what is your system and what is your process? And people are going to have bad days, Paul, as well. Like I'm not suggesting every single day at Sydney was a great day, and when we started at Melbourne, people are going to have bad days. But if we have a system of our culture code, our understanding ourselves and each other, building strong relationships, and giving feedback, we'll get through those down times. Okay, I talk about talent-based teams or behavioural-based teams. I've never seen a talent-based team can't win a premiership. We've seen it, but they drop to the bottom of the ladder when they're talent. Does everyone understand that? Behavioural-based teams have more of a platform up, slide down, up, slide down. That's what you want to try and be in business, right? So your down times don't plummet. because your system is, geez, Mark looks like he's having a bad week. Mark, come in. Sit down, mate. Let's go and have a coffee. How you going? Oh, mate, I'm having a bad time at home, blah, blah. Oh, okay. So your system captures the down times. Does that make sense, Paul? So then, because we're never going, every day is not going to be a great day. I don't care what your system is. But if you have a system, those days are going to drop slightly. They're never going to go to shocking months because you're going to help each other out, go back to your culture code, induct people when they're coming in the business, inquire on people, how you going, have a system of feedback. Geez, Trevor, you seem like you're a bit down today. Oh, Trev, mate, fantastic. Yeah, you're having a great week. Can you go and help Mark out? Yeah, he's a bit down this week. He's struggling. Does that make sense, Paul? So if a system is going to catch pretty much everything you have, and that's what a great footy club does.
Yeah, and I think so. And I like the fact that you can't live with dramatic drops in, because if you're playing footy, and you don't win on the weekend, Monday could be a pretty bad day, like feeling wise. But, you can't live like that because, you've only got sometimes 4 days to get back to it.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Over to Rodrigo. I see you got your hand up.
Hi, Paul. Thank you very much. Well, in my case, I'm passionate about football. However, the same feelings with footy, And as Paul is saying, if we lost a weekend game, sometimes it's hard to recover. So, Paul, I would like to ask you, you were mentioned about being a role model, right? That is highly linked to, as well with behaviors. So I would like to ask you, what do you think, what are the key behaviors or the must behaviors that a leader must to show?
Yeah, there's probably two ways to answer that, Rodrigo. Is when you establish your culture code, then hold yourself accountable to those. But generally, the things that I think are really good leaders now, they've got really good empathy. They communicate really well. They have a really good understanding of their staff. And I think the other thing that I think there's a misconception for leaders, you don't have to know everything. I think the really good leaders, Rodrigo, geez, can I get back to you? I don't know that. And that's that vulnerability piece. People think it's funny, some of the terms now I think have got a bit out of control because of books and podcasts and this term psychological safety and this vulnerability. Yeah, people think vulnerability has got to go and cry at work every day. No, that's not the case. But just be who you are. Rodrigo, actually, I don't know the answer to that, mate. Can I get back to you? I think that's a sign of a good leader. Or can you help me with that? Asking questions, letting people do their job. I think it's the simple skills that we love, but we tend to overlook because traditionally, and as I go back to when I started, a leader was tell you what to do, tell you when to do it, tell you how to do it, and yell at you if you didn't do it. That doesn't exist anymore. You have to bring people along with you. All right. Leadership is about influence. How do I influence you to want to do the things that we want to do collectively together? All right. So, Rodrigo, they're the main things. But, if you have established your culture code, this is who we stand for, these are our behaviors, then the leader has to be the number one person at that. And if they fall out of that and they don't do something on the list, guys, I just want to start this meeting. I know we're just going to discuss the P&L today, but can I apologise? I said I was going to do something. I know deliver on our word is one of our big behaviours we hold ourselves accountable to. I didn't do it leading into this meeting. I just want to apologise. It won't happen again. So they're the things that I really think are really important for good leadership.
Great, Paul. Thank you very much. No, as you said, I recently read about a book from Toyota. They say that sometimes it's important to say being vulnerable. Say that if you don't know something, try to be transparent, but come back later with an answer.
Exactly, 100%.
Thanks, Rodrigo. But with you mentioning that the leader leading number one, the one big takeaway for me earlier was you mentioning the leader needing to flex into the other colours. That was massive. Sometimes I see myself that they don't they don't do it because they can't flex into that other color. And by not doing that, they don't live it. I'll go to Alicia quickly, one more, because Paul, I'd like to finish up just with you mentioning how people can get in touch with your company too. But I'll go to Alicia for
Yeah.
one final question.
Thanks, Brad. Hey, Paul. I'm actually from your old stomping ground, so I'm sitting at Box Hill Aths Track. My daughter's doing a high performance session at the moment. She plays netball, but I coach domestic netball teams and also rep teams that are working learning development as well. I've seen my domestic kids and my rep kids win premierships, make finals. They're not friends when they first come together. But what I see from them in their high performance teams is this level of trust. And this comes from kids that are 8, 9 to 15 years old. Even talking to from a work perspective, when we're trying to get teams together to talk about behaviours, what I see is that if there's not a high level of trust, they won't try and come together to talk about their behaviours and build a culture. Is that something you've seen, and how have you managed to sort of navigate that at the Swans? And I'm a Swan supporter too, so thank you for the 2025 premiership. And yeah, so what have you seen sort of change?
Yeah, trust is not a nice to have. I think people think of trust as one of those airy-fairy things. Trust is an economic driver, and you talk about sport. Trust, but what is trust? Trust is character and competence and care. Can you do your job? Are you a good person? And do you care about people? And you've got to work on those things. Trust is really the pillar of how we created the Bloods culture. Imagine sitting around and some of the things we did, not so much horrify the corporate world, but people go, "What, you did that?" Like, yeah, but the basis was to give feedback and develop trust. We would get the players, as I said, to vote for the leadership group, and they would have to read it out. And then we'd say, "Guys, anyone disappointed they missed out?" "Yep, I am." "Okay, can we give some feedback for Paul, why he missed out?" So then we build trust through having conversations, through having relationships. But then whatever role it is, we have to show we can do that role, even as young as 8s and 9s. Kids are smart. I mean, this ridiculous notion. When I was coaching my kids now 29 and 31, but I was umpiring them when they were playing Oz kick, when they banned scoring in Oz kick, and I'd umpire, and the siren would go, the game had finished, and every kid would run. "Oh, who won? Who won? Rosie, who won?" I said, "No, it was a draw." Every kid knew the score.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have to build trust through our actions, all right, and then we help that through our conversations. We set up a system of accountability. All right, Stewie Maxfield becomes captain because he's very good at those behaviours, and then we systemize our culture. Now, it's slightly different, as I said, at every company, every organisation, every sporting team that we deal with. But trust is about actions. Can I do my job, and am I of good character? Under pressure, do I do what's best for myself, or do I do best for the team? And probably what the comment I made before about American sport, under pressure, what happens in American sport? I'll just do my best for myself now. All right, so think about trust in those terms: character, competence, and care. All right. Am I a good person? Do I do my job under pressure? Am I technically good at what I do? And do I care about my teammates? And then we start to build a really trusting environment. And part of building a trusting environment is having challenging conversations. This is where this psychological safety, it started to become a bit more, we got to be delicate at work. No, psychological safety is just building an environment where we can have really honest conversations. That's what psychological safety is, and we build that through building trust. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah. So thanks, Alicia. Paul, thanks so much for coming on and helping us here throughout the organisations involved in this call. And thanks for everything you have done, mate, and everything you continue to do to help us create a better future. Really appreciate it. Paul, how can people reach out to Performance by Design and get some support and engage further?
Yeah, look, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So send me a LinkedIn thing if you want me to respond. Just go on our website, www.performancebydesign.co. It's .co. But yeah, the easiest way to get hold of me is probably through LinkedIn. and I'm pretty active, and I'll send him a phone number. I'm not precious about that, and we can have a conversation. So, but yeah, thanks very much for jumping on. I really enjoy these conversations and enjoy spending time with good people. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Paul. It's been an honour, mate. We've all enjoyed the conversation so much. I'll speak on everyone, mate. We'll let you get back to your evening. Thanks for joining us from in the night, mate. Cheers,
Thanks
Paul.
a lot. I appreciate it. Good on you. Thanks, team. Talk to
Yeah.
you. Bye.
Bye. What a great episode. Remember, you can subscribe and like and share this episode and others to help others learn and grow and create a better future. For me, this episode, there was so many takeaways. I'm just going to give you the few key ones. The first for me was getting very clear on the ideal behaviours you're going to focus on as a team, and then really living it and leading it through great feedback, both positive and constructive. That came through very strongly. But the biggest takeaway for me was the discussion around insights profile, or DISC as you may know it in a different form. But leaders needing to be able to flex into different energies that they may not normally have as their preference. And to me, this is a key. I see it so often in organisations that I work with where the leadership shadow is not strong, potentially around being systematic and paying attention to detail, and it can cause a lot of trouble. A leader being able to, who may be more exuberant, personable, driven, being able to lean into that systematic piece when needed makes a dramatic difference rather than just neglecting it. The other case is that more systematic, process-driven person that doesn't inspire and lead into that high energy when it's needed to help inspire others and drive motivation or drive fast outcomes through a more red dominant type of approach. We need to flex into them all as leaders to truly be great. And as great leaders, we create great organisations, as Paul mentioned, through sport, and then also with what he and his organisation do now through organisations. Thanks again for your time and all the input, Paul. Thanks for helping us create a better future. Bye for now.